Joao, it's a pleasure to meet you.
You're welcome.
We finally meet again.
Yes, it's a
Perhaps in
pleasure to be
person.
here.
Welcome to Berlin. Welcome to
Thank
our
you.
current studio.
Thank you. It's a nice one.
You and I have been discussing a lot about your process, how you make music, and I always find inspiring how you are making music, the actual way you approach music production. And at the moment, you're producing only in the box.
Yes.
So walk us through the process. How you make music, when do you sit down, what tools you use, and also why you actually produce only with your DAW.
Okay, so basically, I know a lot of producers that struggles with their neighbors and to finding a decent space to produce music without disturbing anyone. So it was a bit a normal process for me to start making music more and more at home. And the first mixes that I did with headphones, they were terrible, absolutely terrible. But with time, I started to compare more and more tracks and have a lot of. I work a lot with references. I'm always double checking everything with another tracks of mine and tracks from other artists that I use as a reference and as a guidance. So I started to have a studio and to work there, but I'm um, I'm kind of a true Batman because I really love nights and I really love to work from midnight to 4, 5, 6, in some extreme cases 7, 8 a.m. I really like the night. That's where I can focus, and that's when my cell phone is not ringing or anything. So slowly I started to find more comfort at home, and I find using headphones, you can feel it's a really intimate sound, you know. I know I have to be aware of the volume, so I try to produce at a lower volume so I can protect my ears. But it's nice that I think I can hear a lot of details with headphones. So this is how I listen music, and now but now let's talk about how I do it. So I do it in the box because I started to dive really deep into Ableton, as you can see in my first of Sound masterclass.
Yeah.
And I work a lot with chains, and I love the save as. You know, I love to try a different approach, but having the opportunity to go back. And sometimes this is really useful for me, and I would say that with the more conventional hardware studio process, that can be a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
It happened to me already to do a save as and find out, no, this is not the way, and go back. Sometimes I find another track in the whole save as of another track. So basically, this is how it turns out. And also sometimes I like to try a setup of a digital synth and then duplicate it and try a different envelope or something
To see what works.
to see how it works. I like this concept of doubling things and try out and delete. So that kind of justifies why I'm in the box.
Yeah.
To be honest, of course, a friend of mine borrowed me a modular setup, and of course that was handy, and of course I could do crazy experiments and then work with that kind of material and process it and do some tracks that of course happened. I used to work with a couple of analog synths, and I also did some tracks with that, but nowadays I kind of switched to be a completely in the box.
In the box, yeah. And I know, so you know, inspiration, for example, do you make music every day, or is something you do when you get inspired, for example?
No, this is almost a paradox, but for me, music. Let me put it this way: some people say, "Oh man, no, I like to touch the buttons because I like to have fun." But for me, music is not to have fun; it's to make music. It's to finish a track. I'm not gonna say no. I do it because of work, but I do it to make music. I'm not like, oh, I want to have fun. But on the other hand, and that's why I say it's a paradox, I find peace when I do music. It's my favorite activity.
Wow.
As sex. So
same place.
Same place. So I really find peace.
Yeah.
And sometimes I almost have to control myself, because I know that if I say, let me check what I did yesterday, it can happen that I will stay there for hours or 3. So sometimes I say, no, it's better not to go now, better go later. I really love to make music. And now another paradox, it can be truly frustrating, because it happens when you're starting to make music, you're super excited when you're in a session, and then in the other day when things calm down, you find, no man, this idea is not working, it is crap.
But sorry to interrupt, do you think it's crap, or you think that your mood has changed so you perceive it as crap? It might not be crap.
Okay, that might happen. I don't know, 5% of the times. It already happened that I said, nah, this is not that good. But then I figured it out, as you said. No, this is nice, but I just changed the vibe. For example, there's a track called Cranston that I released on Warm Up. Nowadays, it's probably the track from that EP that I most played, and I get this really good reaction from the audience. I like to play it. And Oscar picked it, and I told Oscar, man, I'm not really sure to release this. I'm not feeling it. He said again the selection, and I decided to let it go. But I was not really sure about that track, and then now I played it a lot. So yes, that can happen too. But as I was saying, a lot of times you go and you say, no, this is not as good as I thought. But as you grow as an artist, I think that happens less and less and less and less. So sometimes it still happens to me, and it's frustrating. But we have to learn to deal with this kind of frustrations and put it in a constructive way, and find a path to grab what there's that kind of makes sense, or you can work on and develop it to something useful and worth.
Yeah. And I mean, you say multiple times in other interviews, also when we discussed, that you always want to create fresh music. When you think about a release, you put it out, the next one is going to be somehow different. How do you make sure that you create something that is fresh? For example, do you experiment a lot? Do you try to take your previous work as a reference and then move away from there, or something else?
The thing for me is to not lie to myself. Because making music is really about creating a method.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, João, do something to play tonight that works, of course I know if I use this sequencer with this instrument, with this saturation, with that hi-hat, you can do something for people to dance that kind of, let that works. But if you have in mind that you want to work like a factory, you're lying to yourself, kind of. At least I'm lying to me, because I mean, for me, each track is a new world, a world of possibilities, a world where I can combine what I already know with new things. So yes, I try to not to fall into the trap of doing this kind of tricks that I already know that works and finish a track like this. And maybe in the past maybe it happened that I did it. Some tracks can be slightly similar, but right now I'm finishing way less music, and I'm really trying that each track has its own character and and people, but still have the, let's call it the Temudo signature or sound.
Yeah, you call it signature sound, style. Well, how do you feel like you have achieved this style? I know you also moved from drum and bass with another alias before going to techno. Now it's been like years that you've been doing techno. Do you feel like you have your signature sound?
To be honest, that's the most hard. That's the hardest question for me to describe. I think so, and people, it's a huge compliment for me when people say, "Man, I knew that this track was yours."
Yeah.
But it's, of course, I know it has to do a bit of, it has to do with the way I distort things, the way I use the amplifier, the way I use the saturation, but it's a multiple factors on how I do things that I think that creates something, and that's understandable by others, I would say.
Yes, and I think I told you before, but like when I listen to your music, I think most of the time it recognizes your music by listening to it. For me, it's a matter of like kind of color almost based, and the space that you have in the tracks. So it sounds powerful, neat. The kick usually is like very, very present, very they're giving the rhythm. There's always a component of groove that for me I like it a lot, and then there is a sense of space. You know, you feel like in the headphones it feels like, wow, this is like nicely put. The sounds are like nicely spread over, gives this kind of like space and warmth at the same time, and I think that's part of what I associate, at least from my point of view, to your sound.
Well, thanks. Thanks for that. Of course, this is something that I it's beautiful to hear from me. I mean, it's an achievement to have this kind of color in my sound, but technically, I like to do experiments with short reverbs on the main elements. I do grain delay processing also on leads and on drums, and without being too much experimental, I'm using this kind of experimental tools to do concrete stuff.
Right.
And I think these things helps to have this kind of aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, so the techno part, but also the experimentation that creates something.
Yeah, you know, for me, almost, I don't know, 98% of the times that I say, oh man, I heard that track, I want to do something in this vibe, I always move to other stuff. I mean, I'm on the process, searching what's happening, and then, okay, this is the way. So a lot of times I have something in mind, but I know in the end that most likely I'll go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I really depend on the experimentation.
Right.
Really depend.
And talking about the inspiration, where your inspiration comes from, question that people wondered before this chat, someone asked, do cities give you inspiration? For example, Birmingham, Berlin, Lisbon, are cities giving you inspiration in some way?
I wouldn't put it like that. It's funny, you know. I found some tracks from Rudges, from Surgeon, that I say, damn, I can feel the influence on me, but I'm only now discovering this track. So I think it's a question. I think those artists and me, we kind of thought the same way, with the synthesizers, with the processing, with the approach, and we ended up in different eras with different gear doing the same aesthetic product.
That's so interesting.
It's crazy and it's super interesting. I say like, oh man, this is really my vibe, but only now. But this track is 25 years old or 23, and I'm like,
holy shit!
Wow. Yeah. So we kind of thought the same stuff. Well, but what inspires me, going into the places and listening to the music, being there, that's the first thing that. You know, I think this happens to everyone. We have this kind of photographic memory with the vibe. For me, techno, it's really photographic because it's a loopy thing. It's you really catch the vibe in brief moments that stayed with you. So that really gives me, that really inspires me. I also love love cinema, love art, and I think all of these combines into
help you make music.
into something. Yeah,
Yeah.
to be honest.
That's very cool. And let's talk also about Haze, your label. I know you co-run it with another 4 people now.
Yes.
What is the process? How does the process look like? Do you guys hang out and then make decisions together? Do you have set dates for meetings, or do you have release schedule that you need to work toward, or I don't know, anything about the process you can tell us?
To be honest, we have this. I think we have a beautiful story because we really started Haze not in a business, not with a business vision, but with an aesthetic vision. We were just guys that loved music, loved production. We're still learning about aesthetics and with which tools to use and how to use them. So we were really friends that were in the dance floor. Oh, do you heard that hi-hat? Yeah, man. Oh, do you heard that distortion? Always in this mood, always discussing hard, going to the raves, then going do our own little after hours, and still doing the analysis and talking about music, and that's how it was born. And we still, of course, are aware of what's happening into the scene, how the aesthetics are evolving, how sometimes we're looking backwards to go forward, and this is the core. This is the core of it.
Yeah.
This is the core of it. We still, of course, sometimes Nuno is more with Pedro. I might be sometimes more with Arthur, and then have a call with Vasco and be 2 hours on the phone with Vasco.
Yeah.
And of course we have meetings and we disagree a lot of times, but we have to try to be in the position of our colleagues and try to understand sometimes the aesthetic direction that they're going, why they're going, why we're not happy with it, discuss it, respect it, and sometimes it happens that it can be something out that maybe I wasn't understanding when it came out and why everybody liked it, and maybe in 1 year I will be more aligned with that. But of course, when the 5 of us say, "Oh man, this is a good track," we're like,
Okay,
we say, "Okay, this is gonna work."
Simplifies the process.
But it's not easy. It's 5 people.
Yeah.
It's 5 people. It's a lot of people to judge.
Do you have like regular meetups or calls if you don't live in the same place?
Yeah, we have it. Sometimes it can happen that we have this more space between the meetings, but of course we have, and we have our work groups online, and where we're listening to demos and selecting stuff. But of course we talk a lot with each other about music.
Yeah.
And
super interesting. I have 2 sub questions. Let's finish the label part and then I'll ask you about the personal side.
Sure.
Do you guys feel with Haze that you found your audience? And if so, how did that happen? Was it natural that people started following you and then they continue following you? Or for example, it was something that you had to think about?
No, I think people found us and they started to follow us as we. I'm proud that Haze is not following any kind of trend. To be honest, we stayed true to our methods and to our aesthetic vision, and I think that just audience that relates to this kind of way of thinking about music.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard for me to put it in another way.
Yeah. So it feels like it came naturally, and now I think yes, an evolution of that is that you guys have a residency, a GAR in Portugal. How's that going? You guys happy with the nights?
Yeah, of course. GAR is such a special place in our hearts, and it's a club that breeds techno.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're super happy, and we hope we continue with this partnership.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, it's always good when you have your own residence in a place.
Yes.
You have creative direction. You know that you have that gig that comes for your collective, and that brings a lot of pleasure and fun.
Pleasure and fun and I mean, we're always talk about music, but I mean, this is all possible because of the human interactions.
Yeah.
So it's also so good to have artists from Australia like Fergus Sweetland and bring him in to play, or Leo Quelza. So even we can having the opportunity to bring them to play with us and to the Portuguese audience to get to know them. Yeah, it's something that we're really happy for.
Yeah,
definitely.
And now you're talking about these personal relationships and friendships, especially with your label co-owners, co-founders. Were you guys friends from before, or you actually met through music or through the label?
We all met because of music and because of techno. To be honest, we're not that case where we're 8 years old together playing soccer and eventually started a label. It was not that, but of course we developed a really close relation with each other. Of course, you know, when you started also to travel with someone and discussing something in a daily basis, of course people get super intimate.
You get closer, yeah. And another question still related to labels in general. So you released on some, of course, you released on Clockworks, Haze, of course. Like, when it's not your label and you approach other labels, how do you send demos? Are you the one approaching them? Are they approaching you in these cases, or I don't know?
Oh well, this is maybe also a kind of advice to not an advice, but maybe younger artists can understand how things happen. So in most of cases, the labels receive like tons of demos. So sometimes for them to pick to say, oh, I know this guy, let me listen this carefully. That's because most of labels are run by DJs, and when they recognize someone that they play and they like,
right,
that's when the click goes. And so with all these labels that I released, I felt it happened that way.
Right.
Before they played my stuff, I already tried with no replies, but eventually, when they started to play my music, it's almost a cliche, but it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some cases where the first release from some artist is already on a huge label. Well, maybe they waited more time to put their first release out, and that can be also a smart move. But sometimes, you know, it's just coincidence in life, and maybe you can met in person, already an artist, and you're close to him, or you have someone that knows him and says, hey, listen to this guy, he has no releases, but he's already really good. But I would tell a young artist, like, don't rush. Don't rush stuff. It's not like it's not like you're producing for 3 months and I say, no, I think it's time for a release. No, I mean, calm down. Be sure that you already have a right judgment to music and to understand, okay, what I'm doing is something playable and valuable, and it's time for a release.
And how can someone, in a way, test whether this is the case? For example, let's say you are an artist that is starting out, you are a couple of years in production. Some of your friends say, oh, these tracks are cool and nice. How do you know when is a good enough track?
Well, that's a bit tricky, but first I would say that if you're making music and you're a DJ, you can of course test and then be realistic with your music, and you really have to control your ego and not lie to yourself, like, oh, this is the best track in the world, I'm doing all, like, you have to be a bit realistic, have the feet on the ground. And of course, I mean, if you have some friends that DJ or are touring and they play your music a lot, okay, that's the biggest proof you can have.
People actually effectively using the tracks.
That's the big proof that it might work.
Yes, and then do you, in that case, if you were to recommend or suggest some ideas, right, so would you recommend people to create their own label and then send promos, or how can someone send their music to an established DJ to see if they want to play it? It's not a demo. I'm saying like testing whether the music is good.
Well, again, if not everybody lives in Berlin or in London or in Paris, or so it can be harder for someone that doesn't know the people directly. But there are labels doing a great job and that have a more constant release schedule, and they're listening to demos because they want to keep their schedule always going. And so from there you can go to a bit more from that label and maybe to a more known label and like a ladder, That's how it happened with most artists. Some cases started really nice, but others started more gradually, and it's a natural way of doing things and to grow.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, realistically, like not everybody gets access or is lucky or makes enough good music to release on huge labels at the start. So I think
building your own is always a good idea, but in some cases people do their own label and they say, now I can release a lot. I can finish a track and release it. No filter, and that can be tricky. You always need a really, really good filter. And sometimes it's better to I'm also making this rule to myself. If I'm working with a label manager for a label right now, and I finish this track and I'm a bit excited, I have to calm down. I'm not going to export it and send it.
Right.
I have to wait for tomorrow or for the other day to really calm down. Let's be realistic. Let's be critical.
I like that, because then you bring almost like another version of you.
Yes.
To check the same music, and you have a filter.
Yes, because I don't know. Doing music, when I make music, when I have a 4-hour session, I'm a bit high. It's hard to explain, but you get into a point where you really focused and you are you're not really in your maybe normal setup. The normal setup. So sometimes it's better to chill out for 1 day, 2 days, and then reevaluate things.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's super useful advice because it brings that objective, not the filter.
Yes.
Yeah, and talking about advice, like what is a piece of advice that you have received throughout your music journey that for you was really, really important and it really helped you a lot?
Some people told me exactly to have a good filter and to not release every idea that you create, and that was useful. Was useful. Also, I'm not going to. I don't want to be misunderstood, but also releasing on labels that treat your music with love and passion is also, of course, important. I was also told by the distributor that the music industry, it's super unpredictable and has no feelings, kind of. So, and I always have this in mind. Always have this in mind because we all see sometimes how weird can it be, can the scene be, or sometimes we see music that it was unthinkable that it would reach a major audience, and it's there, and so we always the feet on the ground, I would say that.
And also I guess like not taking things personal is always very useful, because sometimes
of course it's good that you brought it up, not take it personally, man, because you can't be offended because a friend of yours that has a label rejected your demo. You have to take it as something constructive and please don't take those things personal.
Yes, and keep going. Yeah, that's the key.
Keep always going. Keep always going and improving, and focusing on the music.
Yes, I love this conversation. Couple of more final questions. One thing that people don't know about Temudo, one of your secrets.
That's a good one, man. That's a good one. Well, for example, my first rave was at 18 years old, which is I don't know, but not that common, I would say. I heard my friends, oh, my first rave at 12, 13. For me was really late 18, so it was a bit. It's when I discovered, oh, this is also cool, because I lived in an area where you have all this reggaeton, all this Latin electronic that I have to respect as everything, but I don't like it at all. At all. Also some weird Brazilian music near where I live that I just wasn't related. So I discovered the club culture only when I moved to study sound in a different area. And also, before saying to myself, this is what I want to do, actually I said to myself, this is what I want to do, like music, when I was in a Limp Bizkit concert.
Wow.
And they were doing the sound check, and came with the guy with the guitar, and that wall of sound of the guitar, I was like, nah, I'm going this direction, because I wanted to be a lawyer or a physiotherapist. Nah. So yeah, I just started to play guitar a lot. So I went, sometimes I remember there are some stuff that I listen nowadays. There are some stuff that when I listen nowadays, what I was hearing back then, some stuff I'm slightly ashamed, but other stuff were cool.
But made you who you are.
Yeah, made me. Yeah. It made me. So it's. I think all of us have these guilty pleasures.
Yeah, for sure. So you went from like thinking about being a lawyer, then physiotherapist, then Limp Bizkit, and you were like, boom,
and
techno in the end.
And before that, going to a jazz school.
Wow.
Yeah, but I don't know, discovering FX Twin and Eamon Tobin, Noisia, when that was a breakthrough moment for me.
Wow.
And only a couple of years later, discovering techno.
Yeah. And then eventually you were like, okay, I'm sold, I'm done. Give everything away. Now it's techno.
Now it's techno.
Very cool. One more question. So traditionally we do a HoS sound. What is one question you would like to ask the next guest without knowing who they're gonna be? Now you can have fun.
Well, the obvious one, I mean, it's not obvious, but what track do you secretly listen in the bus or in your car that you're truly ashamed to show to your techno friends? That they will say, what?
I like this question. I'm thinking about mine. It's definitely a guilty pleasure.
Of course.
Joao, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure. Always good to spend time with you.
My pleasure.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome, man.